Jayden King pushed his worn black mountain bike down the quiet residential street, his breath visible in the crisp morning air. It was early. Too early for traffic or noise, just the sound of rubber tires on pavement and the occasional chirp of birds waking up with the sun. He wore an old Army PT shirt and grey joggers, the kind of clothes that didn't scream status, just utility. A duffel bag was strapped tightly to the rear rack of his bike. Inside, gym clothes, a canteen, and a meticulously folded army uniform. He was on his way to the park near the old train yard, where he did his 6:45 a.m. solo drills every morning. That was his routine. Quiet, disciplined, unnoticed, or so he thought. As he approached a four-way stop, a police cruiser rolled up from the side and jerked to a sudden halt. Jayden instinctively slowed his bike. A second cruiser came up from behind and blocked the street. He looked up. Two white officers, early 40s, stepped out, already keyed up. "Off the bike!" one of them shouted. Jayden, startled but composed, lifted his hands slightly and slowed to a stop. "Is there a problem, officer?" "You match a bolo. Black male, dark shirt, backpack, riding a bike. Don't make this harder than it needs." "To be," Jayden blinked. "A bolo? I'm just headed to the park. I do this every morning."
"Yeah, we've heard that before," the other officer sneered as he approached. Without further words, they grabbed the handlebars of his bike, yanked his duffel bag off the back, and started rifling through it. One officer turned him around, patting him down with force. Jayden didn't resist.
He kept his voice calm and measured, the way he'd been trained to when facing escalation. "There's an ID in my wallet," he said evenly. "Left back pocket." The officer hesitated, then pulled the wallet free. He flipped it open quickly, then froze. Inside was a crisp, official military identification card. His eyes scanned the name. Capt. Jayden King, U.S. Army Special Forces. The officer's mouth twitched. He glanced up at Jayden. "This real?" Jayden held his gaze. "Yes, sir, and I'm expected to check in for morning PT in less than 10 minutes. I missed check-in once in 2017 because of a roadside bomb." Silence. The second officer looked confused. "So, what are you saying?" "I'm saying if I don't check in, someone's going to come looking. And it's not going to be quiet." The officers exchanged a glance, half disbelief, half worry. Jayden looked at his watch. 7 minutes, he said. Then he stood, silently, letting the tension fill the air around them. The rumble started low, distant, like a thunderstorm on the horizon. Then it grew louder. Tires against asphalt, the sharp bark of commands through radios. Jayden stood still, watching the horizon. The two cops were now visibly unsettled, one of them shifting his stance and muttering into his shoulder mic. And then they arrived. The first Humvee turned the corner, headlights cutting through the quiet street. Behind it came another. Then 3 more. The lead vehicle rolled to a stop just yards away from the patrol cars. Its engine idled with a growl that filled the air like a warning. Doors flung open. Armed soldiers stepped out in perfect formation, fanned across the intersection. In seconds, securing the area like it was a live operation. Jayden didn't flinch. He didn't need to. Out of the lead, Humvee stepped a tall woman in desert camouflage, boots polished, face unreadable, bearing the unmistakable aura of command. "Where's Captain King?" she said, her voice cutting through the air like a blade. The officers hesitated. One pointed slowly. "We stopped him for questioning. Thought he fit a suspect description." "Did you read his ID?" the senior officer stammered. "We did, but he matched the—" "Let me be very clear," she snapped, stepping between them. "You detained and searched a decorated special forces officer without probable cause, while he was in compliance and cooperative. You didn't just make a mistake, you crossed a line." Jayden stood quietly, arms crossed now. His posture had shifted, no longer defensive, but authoritative. Back straight, chin high, a silent testament to his years in the service. Over the next few days, the incident spread far beyond the city limits. What had started as a routine stop and question became a national conversation about race, assumptions, and who gets the benefit of the doubt, even in uniform. Jayden didn't chase the spotlight, but the spotlight found him. Veterans organizations reached out to express solidarity. Black service members from all branches wrote messages thanking him for standing tall, for not letting silence swallow another moment of disrespect. Students made posters with his name during school unity rallies. Even members of Congress tweeted about the event, tagging it as a lesson in dignity and restraint. But Jayden stayed grounded. His day-to-day didn't change. He still woke up early, still rode his bike to the park, still trained hard. Except now, whenever he passed that intersection, neighbors waved, some with respect, some with apology, and others with pride. The two officers were placed on administrative review. Their department issued a generic statement about reviewing policies and procedures, but Jayden didn't wait for an apology. He didn't need one. What mattered more to him was what came next. Weeks later, the city invited Jayden to a community leadership summit. They didn't ask him to speak about military tactics or his medals. They asked him to talk about humanity, about what it feels like to be both a protector and a suspect, a patriot and a target. Standing before a packed auditorium, Jayden didn't wear his uniform this time. He wore a simple black sweater and slacks, nothing flashy, nothing that said rank. He began with a story. I've trained in jungles and deserts. I've led teams through hostile zones where every shadow could be the last thing you see. But nothing ever made me feel more invisible than two men looking at me, here in my own country, and deciding I was dangerous before they knew my name. He paused, letting the words sit. I don't want your sympathy. I want your awareness. I want you to understand that if this can happen to me, with my record, my medals, my discipline, then what happens to the kid down the street who doesn't have a uniform to prove he belongs? Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. Some people wiped their eyes, others nodded slowly, as if hearing the truth spoken aloud for the first time. He finished with this. This isn't about anger. It's about accountability. It's about the kind of country we claim to be, and the kind of country we're willing to build. I've served to protect both, and I still will. When he stepped off the stage, the applause wasn't loud or wild. It was steady, long, full of weight. In that moment, Jayden King hadn't just reclaimed his dignity. He had reminded a city, and perhaps a nation, that real strength doesn't need permission to stand tall. I radioed base when they grabbed me, he said, looking at her. I knew protocol would bring someone. I just didn't expect the full cavalry. She gave him a tight nod, then turned back to the stunned officers. Captain King is my second in command. If anything had happened to him, if he had been harmed, or disappeared from this street, your department would have been talking to the Pentagon. One of the officers, trying to salvage the moment, asked weakly, It's just a misunderstanding, right? Jayden stepped forward slowly. You looked at my skin before you looked at my ID. You saw a threat instead of a man. That's not a misunderstanding. That's a pattern. The block was no longer empty. Residents had come out of their houses, some filmed from porches. A teenager across the street whispered, Is that the army? Jayden didn't need to yell. The Humvees behind him, the soldiers in formation, the captain at his side, they all spoke for him. For the first time, the officers didn't have the power in the room, and they knew it.